Last Saturday was supposed to be ordinary, the kind of afternoon you forget by Monday. Instead, it became the moment I learned how quickly someone can try to destroy you, and how calm you have to be to survive it. I was 30 years old, standing in a department store under bright white lights, wearing the leather jacket my grandfather had commissioned before he died. A vintage bomber, custom patches, one of a kind. Worth money, yes, but more than that, it was history stitched into leather. His history. The only thing of his I had left that still felt alive. My boyfriend was a few aisles away, browsing jackets, running his hand along the racks like he was killing time. We'd been together for about a year and a half, long enough to trust, long enough to assume I knew who he was. I was near the makeup counter, waiting, scrolling on my phone, listening to the hum of the store. Nothing unusual, nothing tense, just a normal weekend rhythm. He walked over and said casually, "Can you hold this for a second?" He handed me my jacket from the counter. I'd taken it off while testing a sleeve length earlier. I slipped it back on without thinking. Then he leaned closer and added, "Hey, can I put something in your pocket real quick? My hands are full." "Sure," I said without looking. I felt the slight weight as he dropped something into the outer pocket. Light. Forgettable. That's the thing about trust. You don't feel it happening. You just act inside it. A few minutes later, we headed for the exit. He'd bought socks. I hadn't bought anything. The alarm went off. That sharp, unforgiving sound cut through the store, through my chest, through the air between us. A security guard stepped forward, young, nervous, polite, and before I could even process what was happening, my boyfriend turned to him, then to me, and shouted, "Oh my God, I can't believe you stole something." The words landed wrong. Too fast, too rehearsed. I remember the way my heartbeat slowed instead of spiking. The way my fingers curled slightly inside the leather sleeves of my jacket. The way the guard looked at me, not angry, just uncertain. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "can you empty your pockets?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out 2 lipsticks and an eyeshadow palette. Still sealed, still tagged. They weren't mine. And the man I loved was already shaking his head, already telling a story where I was the villain. That was the moment I realized something important. Some people don't panic when they're caught. They panic when they're exposed. And if you stay calm long enough, the truth always catches up. When people ask how long we'd been together, I used to say about a year and a half with a kind of quiet pride. Not because it was long, but because it felt steady, uncomplicated, the kind of relationship that doesn't demand constant explaining. We met through mutual friends at a casual birthday dinner, one of those long tables where everyone talks over each other and nobody really expects to meet someone important. He sat across from me, sleeves rolled up, listening more than he talked. When he laughed, it wasn't loud. When he spoke, people leaned in. That mattered to me. I'd dated men who filled every silence like they were afraid of it. He wasn't like that. Our first few months were easy. Separate apartments, separate lives that overlapped neatly instead of colliding. We saw each other on weekends, cooked simple dinners, watched shows neither of us was deeply invested in. He didn't push to move fast. I didn't either. It felt adult, balanced. I was 30. I knew what chaos looked like. This wasn't it. He had a job that paid fine. Not amazing, but stable. I worked longer hours than he did, but I didn't mind. I'd always been independent. I paid my own rent, managed my own schedule. The jacket, my grandfather's jacket, hung by the door of my apartment, and he knew what it meant to me. I told him early on, not dramatically, just honestly. He had it made for him before he died, I said once, brushing a thumb over one of the patches. It's kind of my anchor. He nodded, serious. That's special. And I believed him. There were small things, though, not red flags, at least not ones I named at the time. He had a way of avoiding responsibility with humor. If he forgot plans, he laughed it off. If something went wrong, it was always bad timing, bad luck, someone else's fault. Once, early on, we were splitting a dinner bill, and he hesitated, joking, "Wow, you really keep track of everything, huh?" I smiled, paid my half, let it go. It wasn't worth dissecting. Another time, he tried on my jacket without asking. I stopped him, gently but firmly. "Please don't wear it," I said. "It's not just a jacket." He raised his hands, amused. "Relax, I was just trying it on." He gave it back, no argument. I told myself that was respect. For the most part, things were good. No shouting matches, no dramatic breakups, no jealousy scenes. He didn't check my phone. I didn't check his. We trusted each other, or at least I trusted him. That trust made me generous with my assumptions. When he asked me to hold things for him while shopping, I didn't think twice. When he said, "Just for a second," I believed him. When something felt slightly off, I explained it away before it could settle into discomfort. That's the part people don't talk about enough. How manipulation doesn't start with control. It starts with normalcy, with routines, with you filling in the blanks with the best possible version of someone. I'd never seen him steal, never seen him lie outright, never seen him panic. So when Saturday came, when the store was loud and bright and full of witnesses, I wasn't prepared for how easily he stepped into a different role. The man who'd cooked dinner in my kitchen, the man who'd listened quietly across that long birthday table, the man who'd nodded when I talked about my grandfather. He disappeared the second the alarm went off, and the stranger who replaced him didn't hesitate at all. Looking back, the warning signs didn't arrive as explosions. They arrived as pauses, as moments where something almost made sense until you replayed it later and realized it never quite did. He never cried. Not when we argued, not when he talked about his past. His emotions showed up differently. Tight jaw, clipped humor, silence stretched just long enough to make you feel it for him. I mistook that restraint for maturity. He also hated being corrected in public, not openly. He didn't snap or raise his voice. He'd smile, nod, let it pass, then circle back later with something like, "You kind of embarrassed me back there," said lightly, as if it were a joke I'd missed. It always landed heavier than he made it sound. Money was another quiet fault line. We split things evenly, but he kept mental score in a way I didn't notice at first. If I paid for dinner twice in a row, he'd joke that I was keeping him in line. If I asked him to Venmo his half later, he'd roll his eyes like it was petty, even though it was exactly what we'd agreed on. Once I asked him not to toss his keys onto my jacket when we got home. I'd laid it carefully on a chair. "Come on," he said, half smiling. "It's just leather." I moved the keys myself. Didn't argue. Didn't explain. I told myself I was choosing peace. There were other moments, small, easy to dismiss. He exaggerated stories when we were around friends, made himself sound braver, smarter, more put together than I knew him to be. If I corrected a detail, even gently, he'd glance at me with a look that said, "Don't." I learned to let him have the room. The biggest thing, though, was how he handled pressure. When something went wrong, missed deadlines, awkward conversations, misunderstandings, his instinct wasn't to fix it. It was to redirect it, to find an angle where he wasn't the one holding responsibility. I noticed it the first time he blamed a coworker for a mistake he admitted privately had been his. "I just panicked," he said later. "I didn't want to look bad." That sentence stayed with me. Because panic doesn't make everyone do the same thing. Some people freeze. Some people apologize. Some people get quiet. Some people point. Saturday morning, before we left for the store, he was restless. Not nervous, just keyed up. Tapping his phone against the counter, asking how long I'd be. Complaining about crowds. "You don't even need anything, right?" he said as we drove. "I'm just browsing," I replied. At the store, he hovered at first, then drifted away, like he wanted distance without actually leaving. I remember thinking he seemed distracted. I remember thinking nothing of it. When he asked to put something in my pocket, he didn't look at me. His tone was casual, practiced. The way you ask a question you've already decided the answer to. I didn't see his hands. I didn't check. Why would I? Trust doesn't announce itself. It just quietly hands someone access. And here's the thing that still chills me. When the alarm went off, he didn't flinch. He didn't jump. Didn't look confused. Didn't scan the room. He turned. Straight to me, as if he'd already rehearsed where the blame would land. That was the first time I understood that what I'd been calling trust might have been something else entirely. Not a bond. A blind spot. The security guard didn't raise his voice. He didn't grab my arm. He just stood there, one hand hovering near his radio, eyes moving between us, like he was trying to assemble the truth in real time. "Ma'am," he said again, slower now, "I'm going to need you to come with me for a moment." My boyfriend let out a sharp breath, the kind that sounded like disappointment more than shock. He shook his head, once, like this was already exhausting him. "I can't believe this," he muttered, loud enough for the guard to hear, not quite loud enough to sound performative. "I had no idea she was like this." I turned to him, really looked at him. His eyes weren't wide, his face wasn't flushed. He wasn't angry or scared. He was controlled. "I didn't take those," I said evenly. "You put them in my pocket." The shift was instant. His eyebrows pulled together. His mouth fell open slightly, offended. "What?" he said. "Are you serious right now?" Then he turned to the guard, voice rising just enough. "She's lying. I watched her take them. I told her not to. I can't believe she'd try to blame me." The words came fast, practiced, like he'd already mapped out the version where he was reasonable and I was unhinged. I felt something cold move through my chest. Not fear, not panic. Clarity. "Check the cameras," I said. "We were in the makeup section for 20 minutes. I was standing by the jackets. Just check the footage." He scoffed, loud and dismissive. "This is insane. She's trying to get out of trouble." Then, turning slightly away from me, he added, "I want the police called. I'm not safe here." That caught the guard off balance. I saw it in the way his posture stiffened. "Sir," the guard said carefully, "we're going to review the footage first." We were led to the security office, a small, windowless room tucked behind the sales floor. Monitors lined one wall. The hum of electronics filled the silence. My boyfriend leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He sighed heavily, shaking his head as if he were the one being inconvenienced. "I can't believe I trusted you," he said, not looking at me. "Over a year together, and this is who you are?" I didn't respond. The manager arrived, an older woman with tired eyes and a no-nonsense posture. She nodded once, then rewound the footage. We watched in silence. There he was, standing by the jackets. There I was, a few aisles away, the makeup counter, the employee turning her back. And then, clear as day, him, his hand reaching, the items disappearing, him walking over to me, his arm moving toward my pocket. The room went very quiet. The manager paused the video, then looked at him. "Sir," she said calmly, "I'm going to need you to stay here." His face tightened. "That's not what it looks like." She rewound it and played it again. "I was pressured," he said quickly. "She asked me to hold them. She has a temper. I didn't feel safe saying no." I watched him lie without raising his voice, without breaking eye contact. The police arrived soon after. One man, one woman. He went straight to the female officer. "She scares me," he said, voice low. "I've been trying to leave. She's controlling. I panicked." I stayed quiet. I let the footage speak. They watched it, twice. The male officer turned to me. "Ma'am, you're free to go. We may need a statement." Then he turned to my boyfriend. "Sir, you're under arrest for theft and filing a false report." That's when he broke. Not into tears, but into rage. He shouted, accused, claimed the system was broken, that I was manipulating everything, that they were protecting an abuser. The cuffs clicked shut anyway. I walked out of the store alone. 2 hours later, I was home, and I blocked his number. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I closed the door behind me and leaned my forehead against it for a second, not because I was about to cry, but because my body needed to stop moving. My pulse was steady, too steady. The adrenaline hadn't worn off yet. It was pacing, looking for somewhere to go. I took off my shoes, hung the jacket back on its hook by the door, ran my fingers over the leather like a habit, grounding myself in something familiar and real. Then my phone started buzzing. Unknown number. I ignored it. Another call, then another, then a text from a different number. "Please pick up. He's freaking out. You don't understand what you've done. Can you just talk to him?" I didn't respond. I blocked each number as it appeared, one by one, calmly, methodically. 3 hours later, the calls stopped. That's when social media lit up. A mutual friend messaged me asking if I was okay. Another asked what had really happened. Then I saw the post, screenshotted and forwarded before I could even look it up myself. He'd posted from someone else's phone. A long, dramatic paragraph about being falsely accused, about escaping an abusive relationship, about how the system always believes the wrong person. No names, but it didn't need them. The implication was clear. I sat on the edge of my couch and read it twice. My hands didn't shake, my chest didn't tighten. I felt tired. That's when I made a decision. I opened a folder on my laptop and labeled it with today's date. Inside, I saved everything. Photos of the jacket, the sock receipt, screenshots of the messages, the timestamps, the blocked call logs. I wrote down exactly what happened while it was still fresh. The order of events, the words used, the names of the officers, the store manager. Not out of revenge, out of self-preservation. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was replaying the store, but because I was recalibrating, rethinking every moment where I'd explained something away, every pause I'd filled for him, every time I'd chosen peace over clarity. By morning, my lawyer had returned my call. "Don't engage," she said after I explained everything. "Document. Let this play out." I listened, because for the first time since Saturday, I understood something with absolute certainty. I hadn't lost control. I'd stepped out of someone else's narrative. And that's when things usually get dangerous for people like him. The first official notice came 2 weeks later. I was at work when my phone buzzed, not with a call, but with an email from my lawyer. Short, direct. The kind of message that tells you things have already moved without asking your permission. He's been charged, misdemeanor theft, filing a false police report. Bail was posted. His parents paid it. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to, not because I was surprised, but because I knew what usually followed. Accountability doesn't end things like this. It provokes them. By that afternoon, I learned he'd filed for a restraining order against me. I remember letting out a slow breath, not a laugh, not a scoff, just air leaving my lungs like my body had already anticipated this step and was relieved it had finally arrived. The claims were exactly what you'd expect. That I'd been emotionally abusive, that I controlled money, that I pressured him into doing things he didn't want to do, that he'd been afraid. Afraid. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. He showed up with his mother and his sister, all three dressed in black, like they were attending a funeral instead of a civil proceeding. His mother glared at me the entire time, jaw tight, eyes sharp with a certainty she'd rehearsed. The judge asked for evidence. He provided screenshots, texts where I'd asked him to Venmo his half of dinners. Financial abuse, apparently. Photos of my jacket, claiming I valued objects more than people. Emotional cruelty. Messages where I asked him not to wear it without permission. Controlling behavior. No threats, no stalking, no contact after the arrest. My lawyer didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She presented the security footage, the police report documenting his false accusation, phone records showing I blocked him immediately, character references from my employer and friends. 3 minutes. That's all it took. Being held accountable for your actions, the judge said calmly, is not abuse. Request denied. He started crying. His mother stood up, yelling about how the system protects abusers. The bailiff warned her once, then again. Outside the courthouse, they followed me. You ruined his life, his mother said. He has a record now. He shoplifted and tried to frame me, I replied. Those are consequences. His sister filmed me as I walked to my car, narrating like she was documenting me fleeing. His mother threw her coffee. It missed me, hit my car instead. I drove away. The next call came from HR. He's contacted the company, they said carefully. Claimed you're dangerous. I explained everything. Showed them the police report, the security footage, the denied restraining order. They were professional, calm. This is clearly external drama, they said. Just keep us updated if it escalates. He didn't stop. He started leaving reviews on our company website, on job boards, anywhere he could type. Employs abusers, not safe, protects criminals. My boss looked at me once and said, he's digging his own grave. Then came the messages from a new number. I have your stuff. You can pick it up. I didn't respond. I notified my lawyer instead. She advised a police escort if I wanted to retrieve anything. I didn't go. 2 days later, my apartment building's lobby door had been pried open overnight. The doorknob to my unit was scratched, the lock damaged. Building security footage showed him and his sister at 3 a.m, trying to break in. They didn't succeed, but they tried. I called the police and handed over the footage. They went to his apartment later that day. He wasn't home. They found my things in his dumpster, including my jacket. The leather was slashed, the patches ripped off, cut beyond repair. My grandfather's jacket, the one thing I had left of him. Destroyed. That was the moment my restraint stopped being mistaken for mercy and became evidence. I didn't cry when the officer said the jacket was destroyed. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, listening to details I didn't want. Slashes along the sleeves, patches torn off, leather cut clean through. My eyes fixed on the empty hook by the door, the place where it always hung. The space looked wrong without it, like a missing tooth you can't stop touching with your tongue. When the call ended, the apartment felt too quiet. I walked to the door anyway, reached out without thinking. My hand closed on air. That was when it hit, not like a wave, but like gravity, suddenly deciding to work harder. I sat down on the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn up. My breathing stayed even. My face stayed dry, but something inside me folded in on itself, slow and irreversible. He knew what that jacket meant. He'd watched me trace the stitching when I talked about my grandfather. He'd heard the story about the patches, where they came from, why they mattered. He'd seen me handle it carefully, like it wasn't just clothing, but proof that love could outlive a person. Destroying it wasn't panic, it wasn't impulse. It was targeted. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was replaying the store, or the hearing, or the messages. I kept seeing the jacket as it had been, worn in at the elbows, the leather softened by years, the weight of it familiar on my shoulders. I kept imagining his hands cutting into it, choosing where to start. Calculated cruelty has a particular sting. It tells you the person wasn't just trying to get away. They were trying to hurt you where you live. The next day, I went to the station to give another statement. Photos were laid out on a table, evidence bags. The officer explained it had new charges, vandalism, attempted burglary. The words sounded clinical, distant, like they belonged to someone else's life. On the drive home, my chest finally tightened. Not enough to cry, just enough to ache. I pulled over once, sat there with both hands on the wheel, took slow breaths until the pressure eased. Then I kept driving. Because that's what I'd been doing since Saturday, keeping it together, being composed, letting the system work. But grief doesn't care about composure. That night, I opened the folder on my laptop again and added the photos of the jacket. I stared at them longer than I should have, zoomed in on the torn patches, the cut leather. Then I closed the folder. I didn't scream. I didn't text anyone. I didn't post. I made tea I didn't drink, sat on the couch and let the weight settle. The hardest part wasn't losing the jacket. It was accepting that the man I trusted hadn't just tried to save himself. He'd tried to erase something sacred to me, just to prove he still had power. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. Not into anger, into resolve. The shift didn't happen all at once. It started quietly, almost invisibly, the morning my lawyer called and said, "We're not negotiating." Her voice was calm, professional, steady. The kind of tone that doesn't dramatize reality, but also doesn't soften it. "He escalated," she continued, "repeatedly. We're going to trial." I stood by the window while she talked, watching people move through the street below, everyone wrapped in their own lives. I realized something then. For weeks I'd been reacting, documenting, defending, absorbing. This was the first time I was choosing direction. The insurance appraiser came 2 days later. He examined the remains of the jacket like a crime scene, measuring, photographing, asking about the custom work, the patches, the age of the leather. When he named the value higher than I expected, I felt nothing. Not relief, not satisfaction. Money wasn't the point, but accountability was. My lawyer filed for restitution as part of sentencing, not out of spite, out of principle. Destruction has a cost. Lies have a cost. Escalation has a cost. His public defender reached out soon after, floating the idea of a plea, reduced charges, faster resolution. My lawyer didn't hesitate. No. The timeline was airtight, the evidence overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. By the time trial came around, I wasn't nervous. I sat in the courtroom with my hands folded in my lap, posture straight, expression neutral. I didn't look at him when he was brought in. Didn't need to. The prosecution laid it out piece by piece. The shoplifting, the framing, the false police report, the denied restraining order, the attempted break-in, the destruction of property. A pattern. Not panic, not confusion, choice. Security footage played on a large screen. Body cam footage followed. Photos of the jacket passed through the jury. Witnesses spoke. Store employees, the building manager, my employer. When his lawyer tried to argue emotional distress, the prosecutor shut it down calmly. "There is no evidence of abuse," she said. "There is, however, extensive evidence of false allegations." I watched the jury as they listened. Some frowned, some nodded. None looked confused. They deliberated for 2 hours. 2. When they returned, the foreperson didn't hesitate. Guilty on all counts. The word landed clean. Solid, final. Sentencing followed 3 days later. The judge wasn't unkind, but he wasn't indulgent either. "You had multiple opportunities to take responsibility," he said. "Instead, you escalated. You made false accusations. You attempted to damage someone's career. You destroyed irreplaceable property out of spite." The sentence was firm. 30 days in county jail, 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management, 3-year no-contact order, and restitution. As the gavel came down, I felt it. Not triumph, not revenge. Release. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd walked into the store weeks earlier, because the truth had done what it always does when you let it stand on its own. It reclaimed the ground beneath my feet. The consequences didn't explode. They settled. Quietly, heavily, permanently. The first restitution payment arrived exactly on time, $350. No note, no apology, just a transaction, processed through the system the way consequences are supposed to be. My lawyer forwarded the confirmation and added a single line. Probation officer is monitoring compliance closely. That was enough. His criminal record became public the way records always do. Slowly, then all at once. Background checks flagged him. Retail wouldn't touch him. His job didn't fire him immediately, but they didn't renew his contract either. Risk management, they called it. His mother didn't take that well. She emailed my employer, trying to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, that he was a good man who'd panicked. HR responded once, politely, firmly, telling her to stop contacting them or they'd pursue harassment charges. She stopped. His sister tried a different approach, long rants online about corrupt judges and women who lie. The post didn't gain traction. Some accounts got suspended for harassment. The campaign fizzled out the way lies do when they aren't fed. Friends split. Some disappeared without a word. People who'd believed his version because it was easier than asking questions. Others reached out months later, awkward and apologetic, after seeing the evidence in court documents. I accepted the apologies. I didn't rekindle the friendships. Trust, once cracked, doesn't seal cleanly. The jacket insurance payout came through. The appraiser's number stood. I found the original craftsman through a long chain of emails and favors. He was retired, his hands slower now, but when I explained what the jacket had meant, he agreed to recreate it. Not replace it, recreate it. Period-correct leather, similar stitching, authentic patches sourced from collectors. The cost was higher than the payout. I covered the difference without hesitation. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about continuity. Therapy helped in quieter ways. My therapist didn't call me strong or brave. She called me consistent, said I'd done the hardest thing, not reacting, not engaging, letting the system work while protecting myself. She tried to provoke chaos, she said once. You refused to participate. That reframed everything. He violated the no-contact order once, sent a letter through his sister, pages of blame disguised as remorse. I forwarded it to my lawyer. His probation officer issued a warning. There wasn't a second attempt. Life didn't snap back into place, but it moved forward. I started seeing someone new months later. Slowly, carefully, I told him the truth early, not as a warning, just as context. He listened, asked questions, didn't flinch. That mattered. I still think about the original jacket sometimes, about my grandfather, about how loss can echo if you let it. But it doesn't control me. He spends the next year making monthly payments under supervision, attending classes, checking in, explaining his record. I spend my time building a life that isn't shaped by what he tried to do. That's the difference. 4 months later, I stopped checking the calendar for updates. Not because nothing was happening, but because everything that mattered had already settled into place. His probation continued. The payments came on schedule. $350 every month, right on time. My lawyer said compliance was likely motivated by fear of violation more than growth. I agreed. Some lessons are learned only because the alternative is worse. The recreated jacket arrived on a quiet afternoon. I opened the box carefully. The smell of new leather hit first. Different, cleaner, unfamiliar. The weight was close. The stitching nearly identical. The patches weren't the same ones my grandfather had worn, but they came from the same era, sourced with care. I put it on. It didn't feel like memory. It felt like survival. I wear it sometimes now. Not often, not casually, when I need the reminder that something precious was attacked, and I didn't let that attack define me. His criminal record followed him everywhere. Job applications stalled. Background checks flagged him. Retail wouldn't hire someone with theft convictions. His parents helped cover rent when the restitution payments tightened his budget. That wasn't my concern. Consequences aren't cruelty, they're closure. One final email came from his mother weeks later. Long, emotional, accusatory. She said I should drop the restitution because I was doing fine and he was struggling. She called it a misunderstanding. Said I'd ruined a young man's future. A misunderstanding. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Didn't respond. The last time I saw his sister was in a grocery store checkout line. She recognized me, stiffened, abandoned her cart, and walked out without a word. Amisom. I didn't follow, didn't react, didn't need to. I'm not untouched by what happened. I still pause sometimes when trust is offered easily. I still document. I still verify. But I'm not bitter. He tried to frame me for a crime, tried to destroy my reputation, tried to erase something irreplaceable. Instead, he earned a record, probation, community service, and a 3-year no-contact order. I earned clarity. Here's the lesson I carry forward. Trust your instincts, but back them up with facts. Document everything. Don't engage with chaos. Let professionals handle what emotions can't. And never mistake calm for weakness. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't retaliate. I didn't play his game. I stayed steady. And in the end, that was enough. Moving forward now,